Today, I'm going to reveal ancient Chinese techniques to painting flames. Yo dog, Kenny Bichet here, Next Level Painting, hitting you up on the literal best of all days, coming to you from the Beats Lab in Hollywood, California. We are doing it again. Today we're going to be working with Mantic, one of my personal favorites, Kings of War. Flame Elemental, this is pretty new. I love this mini, and that gives us a perfect opportunity today to explore fire effects. It's safe to assume that this video is probably something like Fire, Secretly Easy. This is a full-blown airbrush tutorial. As usual, guys, we're going to be taking that model to that next level over on Twitch, which is the home of the live tutorials. If you have not followed me on Twitch yet, it's simple, guys. Let's start moving from here to there. Hit that follow button over on Twitch. Get notified. That simple. All right, let me shout out a couple of clutch individuals who supported me this week on Patreon. We've got Douglas, Matt, The Real Ashman, Chuck, Gethin, Dr. BJ, Kevin, Matthew, Adam, Ais, and Nate. Literally cannot do it without you guys. Patreon is my personal crowdfunding page. It's how I keep the lights on. It's also your path to VIP and early access to all my videos and more for only $6 a month. Anyway, let's do it. Here it is, guys. Kings of War, Greater Flame Elemental, Mantic. Here he is, primed Ghost Gray. And we are going to do some interesting things here today that I've never shown you before. Hobo White, courtesy of slowfusegaming.com. We're going to do a little bit of gangster gumbo action. I'm going to show you this real quick. A little flow improver. It's a Vallejo product. We're going to add a little of this Hobo White. Any white would really do here, but this is a nice pre-mixed white that I get from my main man, Jason, over at slowfusegaming.com. We're going to do sort of a ghetto pre-highlight. So we're going to just lightly glaze in some white up against that ghost gray, starting from the bottom going up. Now, the purpose of this video is to show you that flame style, how we do that fire. Now, fire glows hottest from its source, which is going to be the white yellow, and then it moves to the oranges, to the reds, then eventually to black smoke. So we are going to go a little bit different on this flame elemental than the box art. We are going to go more that true fire effect, and it is a pretty fun effect once you understand how it works. So now I hope you guys can see why we're working this white in, because I'm going to go with yellow first. We're going to use some of that style, that Signar yellow, Privateer Press P3 formula. And what we're going to do now is just basically start painting this dude yellow. Now that we've done essentially a pre-highlight. Okay, so what I'm doing here, what you're witnessing is that I felt like it wasn't thin enough. So I'm adding a little bit more flow improver, a little bit more water. I just felt it important to share that with you guys because we are essentially doing a very thin glaze via the airbrush. Always keep the tip clean when moving to these brighter colors. So now straight up, very light trigger work here. 100% air, just rocking that trigger back to get a little bit of paint to flow through it. And we're going to just coat this thing in yellow and look at that stick. You don't get that kind of stick normally. That's because we're using that ghost gray faded to that white almost as a pre-highlight. Oh, it is a pre-highlight. And we are going in with that Privateer Press, that P3 formula. The stick is ridiculous. If you've ever had any problems with yellow, this will probably solve that problem for you. You can just start gray, white, and then just glaze that yellow on this way. So we are starting at yellow because yellow is one of the harder colors to get to that purest level. Now, if we started this guy orange or red or anything like that, the yellow would always look muddy. It would take a million coats to get the yellow not muddy. So that's why we're starting with yellow. Now we're going to jump into orange. So this is kind of my secret sauce, is that ancient Chinese technique. We didn't even paint the whole guy yellow. There's no point. So what we're doing here is we're going to blur the border between the rest of this guy and that yellow with a little bit of this Troll Slayer orange from GW's. One of the coolest, brightest oranges in the game. So we're going on real thin and we're letting it mingle with that yellow that's real thin. So it creates a nice transition, a nice barrier. And then we're just going to start working that orange to its purest form all around his arms, his chest, his face, all that good stuff. Pretty easy. It's really important when you're working fast like this to keep those paints thin, but don't be afraid to add more paint back to the pot and thicken it up when you need to start, blasting some orange on over his arms. Like we're a little too thin here. So obviously I would add more orange back in. Okay, Mephiston red. This is one of my favorite reds in the game. Same thing you just saw again. We're going to start blasting some red in from the points, his head, his hands. He's got all these rock features built into him. Like all his details are basically rocks flowing through the flame. Like his fingers, his facial features, like his shoulders. We are going to come back and pick that stuff out in a future video over on Twitch for sure. So what our vision is we're pulling back from those points. Those rocks will be a nice cool gray, but we're going to have that fire right up against those rocks, right where the flames are shooting up. Like I said, its hottest source is like white yellow, then it moves to all the way to red, then eventually black. We'll use the hobo shield right here to get some of that red on his hand without undoing some of that cool orange and yellow on his hips. Too easy. Boom, there we go. Now, the thing here with flames and fire when you're working this technique is it is a bit of a back and forth process, because red looks different when it's applied over orange than when orange is applied over red. So both are desirable. And let me show you something real quick. We're going to mix some Abaddon black right into that Mephiston red. This is a pretty muddy black. This is not a true black. This is a better transition point. So now what we're going to do is just work in some of those smoky black tips. Your brain is immediately going to start registering fire, hot, danger. We're going to pull in against those rocks that his fingers and his palms are, so that when we eventually cut them in with those cool blues and grays, that you're going to still see some of that burnt black peeking in between them. We're not going to leave his fingers and all those rocks black, but you just got to think a step ahead when you're working with the airbrush. Make sure to control your angles here. You don't want to get any of this black on that yellow. That would be a disaster. If you're not as confident as I am when you're coming in that close, use the hobo shield. There it is. Too easy. Work that muddled black in, get in between all the fingers, but you don't really have to focus on painting the rock fingers. Like I said, we're not actually going to leave them this color. We're more focused on the flame sculpt, making the tips of that black. And as you can see, it's coming together very nicely. We're getting a very nice, solid fire effect. But there's more. Like, even though it looks really good right now, there's ways to pop the colors out a little bit more, to get a little bit more vibrancy out of them. And you want to be careful, like I said, I've said it a million times, you don't want to get those paints to look pastel. And that's why I mentioned the back and forth process. So right now, we're slinging some of that. We're going to be slinging some of that red back into that black. All right. So right now, black looks a certain way over red. Okay. It's got a good look. We're getting some flame in there, but it's going to look even better when we start slinging some red back in over the black. So here we go. We've loaded back up with a little Mephiston red, and we're going to glaze it back in up against that red. And it's going to fundamentally alter the look. It's going to look more natural suddenly than it once did. Real easy. Same thing right here. We're going to start slinging some orange back in. We're going to work all the way back down. We're going to work red over black, orange over red, yellow over orange. We're going to go all the way back, the reverse order of what we just did. And we're going to work out any of those weird hazy lines, anywhere that looks aggressive, that there might be some speckling. We're going to erase that with these incredibly thin glazes with our airbrush. Working that orange in right now, blurring, adding a little bit of definition to his muscles so that he suddenly becomes more interesting, where you can see the flame points. Building a better barrier between the red and the yellow. And this is the thinnest possible glaze through our airbrush that we can possibly get away with. It's looking amazing. Throw a little bit on his face. You know, you want that coruscating flame to look its most natural. Same deal right here. You know, we'll just work a little bit more into his back. You see how interesting all those twisting and turning, churning flame sculpting is? Like, it's just a beautiful sculpt. Same thing. We're going to pull the yellow out, glaze it in, give ourselves a truly flawless border between the yellow and the orange. It's really not difficult when you understand the process, like I said. I like the way yellow looks over orange. I like the way red looks over orange, but I also like the way orange looks over red. So that's why it's back and forth. And see, what we're doing is we're squirting some of this yellow in, some of these other bulging areas We're going to shoot some into his arms. Some of those churning effects kind of, that would be his legs and his hips. We're trying to create definition into flames, like it's pulsing, it's moving, it's changing. So that's the fun stuff you get to do with fire. Okay, real quick, while that's drying, we're going to put some actual pure black in the airbrush. And we're just going to dust the very tips of everything we did with that muddy black from a few steps ago, just to give it its absolute charred effect. It's most dramatic. Very fun stuff. Now, obviously, pull out the hobo shield. Make sure we get that black engaged, get that charring, that smoke. So it'll look his best all day, every day. Now we're approaching the home stretch. Flash gets yellow. That's our secret weapon yellow. We're going to pull this yellow into the very bottom of the base where it's the hottest, where he's erupting. He's bubbling up from the ground. So we're going to pull this flash gets yellow in there, and we're also going to add it to any of this churning flame effects that we've laid down that we want to be even brighter. Off on the edge here, kind of center mass. Same thing with his biceps. Too easy. Flash gets yellow is the yellowest yellow in the game. That simple. Now you can always add a drop of white if you need to, but you got to be careful. Never overdo it with the whites when you're dealing with yellows, because you can quickly pastel your yellow out and it no longer looks hot. It just looks dirty. So we're going to try that real quick with a couple drops of hobo white. Now here's the good thing. If you work the white into your yellow and it looks too pastel, all you have to do is go back to the yellow and kind of give it a very subtle glaze, like we just did with all those other colors a few minutes ago, and you will undo any of the pastel damage and it will look perfect. So real quick, we're just going to add some of this new whitish flash gets yellow. We're going to just basically make the base as hot as possible. Like that's where it is glowing from. That is where it's erupting from. And we're going to just add a few dots of this new white color to some of those churning coruscating flames that we've been working on. It's a very therapeutic process, guys. When you work with a big, huge flame monster like this and you have an airbrush, it is really fun, really easy, and you get really dramatic effects for minimal effort, but you need to maximize the technique, guys. That's how we're doing it at Beats Lab today. Here he is, feeling good about him. Definitely tune in on Friday while we take him to the next level. Play on, players.